to the Long Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Sopchak-Bankard, and I'm here with three nominees to be determined. First, he's still here. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
Between us, we've had 3 Diet Cokes, 1 pack of cigarettes, and 1 Adderall. I'll let you figure out which one's got which. I'm doing well, Jen. How are you?
I'm doing great. Could use some of those things right now, probably. Haven't gotten up early this morning. And he got nominated, but for the wrong movie. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
Paperwork, people. Let's go. Come on. I'm good, Jen. It's nomination day. It's such a happy day, and it was so fun to get up moderately early where I am and obscenely early where you all are. That's right. Every once in a while, I get the advantage to react live on our text chain and then to share our thoughts throughout the day. So it's exciting. I can't wait to chat with you two about it. Jen, I'm going to throw it to you with the first question because you never get the first question. Don't talk about nominations yet. Just off the top of your head, how did you like the announcement program?
Oh, I thought about asking this, so I'm glad you're asking it. I thought it was above average. Like usually, I think they attempted to make it into an actual event, which in the past there has been no effort. Usually, like it's usually just they have two people of similar notoriety to Bowen Yang and Rachel Sennett, but usually they're just like they read the names all at once and then that's it. Whereas I was watching streaming on Disney Plus and they had like a Good Morning America or some ABC affiliated show had like a pre-show and there were commercial breaks. They like didn't do it all at once and then there was like an after show. So I don't know. It felt like they put more effort in than normal.
I guess I have not gotten up early to watch this before. I'm a sleepy boy, and so I prefer to just wake up and read the list. But I got into the excitement and made it happen. It felt like it was just part of Good Morning America. Like I think Good Morning America would have already started, and so that felt like that's what that crew was. And then they just threw to Bowen Yang and Rachel Sennett, and then added a commercial break because that's when they would have had a commercial break during Good Morning America. But yeah, it did seem more like a packaged thing than what I thought it would be, which is just 2 bleary-eyed young actors reading a list of names off of things. But they had some nice little bits, a good intro from the Academy president and someone else talking, being open-hearted about the wildfires and how that's affected things. And then excellent ratio of bits/jokes to business, where it was just like as soon as it was like, are we gonna joke for a while? I was like, no, they're already giving the nominations. So yeah. Greg, what did you think?
I think I derailed our episode by jumping us into this when I was just trying to let Jen introduce herself with more than just her name. But I will throw in that I thought it was pretty good. I definitely watched this last year, and I think the format was the same because I knew to expect the commercial break, which I think frustrated me last year. But it is kind of nice to have that breather in the middle of the list, kind of look at what's happened, see if you can predict a little bit about what's going forward. And I thought the two of them were fun. And, I always am. I enjoy when there's somebody like Bowen Yang who's in one of the like big movies, but like not the star of it, kind of adjacent to the main flow. So that's really good. So it was great. But Jen, in case people can't figure it out, what are we talking about tonight? What is this episode about?
Yes, I love the gusto, Greg. I really do. So it's fine. For those of you who are scratching your heads, although how many people would that be really? We are talking about the nominations announcement for the 97th Academy Awards, a day that we all look forward to a great deal. Antonio does send his apologies. He wasn't able to be on this recording with us, but all 4 of us this morning woke up at our respective early times. Some earlier than others, depending on what coast you're on. And we were all watching this announcement live and then kind of texting each other live reactions. And I will say the breather, the commercial breaks, entirely necessary because I can't type that fast when I'm half asleep. So like, I can't type that fast when I'm alert. Never mind when I'm half asleep early in the morning when I should be sleeping. So yeah, that was very appreciated where I was like, I had to actually do like the like minimize the window on my, because I was on my phone. So it was like a tiny little box with the announcement on the top and then my text messages underneath.
Nice.
And I absolutely cannot wait. I'm with you, Greg, with the enthusiasm. I just want to get into talking about these nominations. But first, PT, if listeners don't want to snub us after listening to this episode, what can they do?
If you're looking for explanations for why Rachel is Fatima, please follow the Long Take Review wherever you get your podcast. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Overcast, YouTube, and any place where you get podcasts. You should be able to find us. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. And we are also on Letterboxd. The account is at LTR Pod. And or you can follow the hashtags LTR Pod to see what each of us individually have been watching, including Greg immediately checking off 2 to 4 Oscar-nominated movies he hadn't seen yet before I had finished teaching classes today. So kudos to him on that. Jen, back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, and I would also say if you're not following Greg on a social media account, you have to, just to see his beautifully handwritten list of all the nominees and how many he's watched. And it's not to us, not shocking, but to the average person, probably shocking amount that he's already seen going into this Oscar voting window. But let's get to talking about these actual nominations. You know, this is, for all of us, this is an auspicious occasion. So I want to start with the happy time. So what made you the happiest? What were you happy to see? And it doesn't matter if it was like a surprise or not. It's just like, what were you like, yes, this is, all is right with the world because this nomination happened.
I'll go first. I'll say I was very happy that Nickel Boys got into Best Picture. That was not... They were definitely on the bubble. It felt like they were probably on the outside looking in as the nominations were coming out. I believe the only other nomination it got was Adapted Screenplay, which was kind of a surprise. That wasn't guaranteed either, but it didn't get cinematography. It didn't get director. And where those were possible, not likely, but possible. So the fact that it did get in there, that's probably it for Nickel Boys, is like, thanks for showing up. But I was very glad that it at least has that as a Best Picture nominee in its in its pocket and on its ledger for the rest of eternity. So that's good.
Well, and I think it's easy for us inside the crazy punditry of this to forget that actually means a huge amount of exposure for a movie, right? Just getting into that Best Picture category, even if that's the only spot, just raises the number of people who see it like tenfold, and make sure a huge number of people will check it out. And I think that's a movie well deserving of that spot. And I say this as somebody who had been planning already to attend the first round of screenings for I'm Still Here, another big surprise in Best Picture. And that screening here in Boston was just about sold out before I grabbed my ticket. So I think it's already showing that there's a real bump for some of these movies that maybe haven't gotten that exposure and are there. So that's not I'm most happiest about, but I will co-sign the Nickel Boys. A little disappointed about cinematography, but we're trying to be happy first. So great that it's adapted screenplay. I don't know if anybody on this podcast has said it before, but people should read the book. It's a really, really good book.
I think there's one of us that said that before many times, if I recall. So what made me the happiest probably was, other than I was also very happy Nickel Boys made it in, that was against, that prediction to me didn't make sense. The pundits were kind of describing that as an Oscar save. Like, it didn't have kind of the resume leading up to today, but that it was kind of a more highbrow artistic project that maybe Academy voters would want to get in there. According to these nominations, apparently no one directed it or did the cinematography. So that's kind of confusing. But yes, I'm also really happy about that. But beyond that, I would say Flow got 2 nominations. So it got nominated an animated feature and an international feature. And that is a really big sign of strength. I wasn't necessarily thinking that it would, because the last time that happened for an animated, it was a documentary. And so I was kind of like, well, this is a fun adventure with a cat. Like, I don't, so I don't know how much traction it's going to have in an international feature. And so the fact that it showed up there was huge, right? And there's a really cute video on the internet that you can find of the director with his dog, who inspired the dog in the movie. And they were like waiting to hear, they were watching the nominations. It's very cute. I was like, give this man an Oscar, please. And the dog gets one too. So yeah, that made me super happy. Yeah. How about you, Greg?
It absolutely has to be, I would say, a complete unknown overperforming. And I think, people know from the LTR's episode, if you got to the end of that episode, that I was lobbying hard for a complete unknown, because it is my favorite of the year and one I'm really excited about. I believe I was just actually trying to remember, and we only recorded like 3 days ago, and I still couldn't remember. My hope dict, I believe I said Monica Barbaro was who I was going to say, but then she seemed so safe that I didn't waste my wish on that. But I was still very excited that Monica Barbaro got in for Best Supporting Actress. That category, I think, had some last minute surges that seemed like it was going to turn that into a really wacky category, and it became just kind of a normal category. But she and James Mangold both making it in for Complete Unknown, I think, is a real sign of strength for that film. I don't actually, it seems like the pundits are like, and it's definitely winning Best Actor, even though the only time Adrian Brody has gone up against Chalamet went down swinging, strumming, humming, making chocolate, whichever, walking that weird way they do in the sand. So I do think, I think that's far from a done deal. It's going to be like each precursor is going to switch that back and forth. But I do think SNL this weekend will help him.
Greg, I think what you were looking for was his knife chipped and shattered.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Wait, but doesn't that make Adrian Brody fade Ratha? I don't like that comparison.
Whatever.
Well, first of all, in honor of Greg, because I have to say, from a predictions perspective, Mangold, people said it was possible because he made it into DGA, but classically not. DGA doesn't match up 1 for 1 with director, and it still didn't, but it was Edward Berger who got knocked out as opposed to James Mangold and Coralie Farjat. I think people had one or the other in that 5th spot. So I'd say people were pretty surprised. And I think the general consensus is, and maybe I'm getting ahead of our conversation, but consensus is Complete Unknown, very, very strong coming out of this morning. Like incredibly strong. It basically got nominated everywhere it could have.
Well, it's interesting because, for those maybe who are not following as closely as we are, just to talk totals a little bit, we can dig into it more. Amelia Perez had the most nominations with 13, which is this, it ties with a bunch of other movies for the second most of all time. And then the second place, a tie for second place with 10 each, were The Brutalist and Wicked. A Complete Unknown tied in third place with 8, along with Conclave. But Conclave, it felt like, because of the ones it missed, maybe people, I don't know if people were thinking it was going to get 10 or so, or if it was just that like it got in some places, but like it didn't get in director. And, I think we had known for a little while none of the supporting actors were going to break through. But it feels like with the same number, Conclave is like, oh, too bad. That was nice. And A Complete Unknown is like surging and has this power where that's going to likely.
They Benjamin buttoned right in the middle.
They did.
Look at them. Yeah. One on the way up, one on the way down.
I had Conclave in director and cinematography. I'm quickly scanning my spreadsheet to see if I missed anywhere else. I had, those are 2 big categories that it missed. So yeah, it's weird. Like I think on our text chain, I was like, bad day for Conclave. And Greg was like, but it got 8 nominations. But I think it's a bad day in terms of like, it started before today. It was sort of like in the top 3 frontrunners. And I feel like it kind of dipped a bit because it didn't get in some key categories. Honestly, Edward Berger missing director is huge. Like I don't think anyone would be sort of like batting an eye at Conclave's frontrunner status or its place in the race had that not happened.
And the only thing I'll add, my earlier comments aside, I think you've read it exactly right, that it is kind of on its way down. The only hope I think it has is that does seem like everybody might have that in their second or third position on the ranked choice voting. I think actually both the 8 nominee movies, A Complete Unknown and Conclave, both seem like they're in the position where there's nobody who's like, this is the absolute best thing I've seen. But a lot of people are like, it's a pretty good number 2 or number 3. So, assuming that, those bigger titles PT mentioned, Amelia Perez or Wicked or Brutalist, might be more of the acquired taste. It could be that those are lower on too many ranked choice ballots than some of what we just mentioned.
All right, so disappointments.
I mean, Jen, I think you can lead us off. You could relay Antonio's disappointment, which I believe we all share.
Yes, it's true. So yes, I'd say biggest disappointment of the entire affair is Marianne Jean-Baptiste missing in Best Actress, which, we gave her, she won the Best Actress category at the Letters, right? We gave her due, but she doesn't even have a chance here, which is really sad. And I know, that was the thing that, like, Antonio, once he knew he couldn't be on this recording, was like, just please say that I'm protesting and with silence because Marianne Jean-Baptiste didn't get in. And we're not the only ones. I've heard lots of critics throughout the day echoing that disappointment. But it's. I now see that my prediction of having both Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Fernanda Torres in was hope dicting, because I wanted there to be space for both of them, but it was clear that they were fighting over that last spot. And Brazil has entered the chat, like because I'm still here, has gotten to Best Picture.
They are very excited. I was seeing on the Oscar race subreddit. I didn't get to read too much of that today, but when I was dipping in, I was seeing people framing the conversation as, this is great, Fernanda Torres is in with a nomination, and it's she's going to be vindicating or getting revenge for her mom losing to Harvey Weinstein and Gwyneth Paltrow, because when her mom lost for Central Station, it was to Gwyneth Paltrow and Shakespeare in Love, and that like slate of winning, that whole like run for Shakespeare in Love is sort of discussed as the peak. Harvey Weinstein being Harvey Weinstein in terms of bullying his way to Oscar wins, not in terms of all of his other crimes, which happen more continually over time. So I do think there's a lot of strong momentum there, the likes of which Marianne Jean-Baptiste maybe did not have narrative wise to match. But yes, I had hoped that she would still get in there. I was fully hope dicting, because I don't have the caliber of self-respect that Jen has as a pundit to not like just succumb to hope dicting. I also wanted Hard Truths to get in still in original screenplay for, with basically no reason to believe it would happen, but I was still hoping, and it didn't pan out, and that's a shame. But that's sometimes some of the best movies just never get nominated for Oscars, and that's how it is, and folks will find that in due time, that movie is wonderful and that performance is incredible. It's still, like, to me, probably the best performance of the year collectively across any category. So that's, again, my opinion, but not the Academy's. So that's a shame, but here we are.
A snub never means they're not real, as pundits often say, because nobody stole that spot. It's just there were more great performances. But I would say I was surprised, and this maybe just shows my bias. I wasn't thinking Cynthia Erivo was a slam dunk there. I know Wicked has been very successful commercially and is beloved. We joked about how Wicked could get blocked out from a bunch of stuff, and the producers of the show would hate it. But, the strong showing for Wicked, including both Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande and just a slew of below the lines. I still have questions about score on that one. How much of the score is original? Yeah, but I think it means a good thing for the show because we joke too much about normies, but it is hard when people are like, I love movies. Nothing I see gets nominated for these silly awards. So I think we're all better off when there is a Barbie or a Wicked in the match in the batch. So hopefully this draws some people in with that nomination as well.
Well, Greg, since you brought up original score, I'm going to once again prompt Jen to say if she wants to talk about maybe one of her disappointments of the day.
Yeah, so challengers completely blanked. Like, no, did not get a single nomination, which I was not expecting it to get many, but score was the one thing I had convinced myself it could get, and that would be its nod from the Academy. We could at least acknowledge it there because it had not only been nominated at the Globes, but won, right? And it was a surprise. And so that's what kind of restored my hope that, oh, okay, like it actually does have standing. That win at the Globes could translate into a spot in the Oscar nominations. But clearly I think it was probably Gold Derby I was listening to because they had their reactions out first this morning. And they were like, look, this branch is pretty snobby and they love to name check. So the fact that Wicked got in is because they just were like, hey, Stephen Schwartz, great composer of Broadway, we would like to reward you and tell you how much we like you as a composer, not necessarily for the score for this movie, right? Which I think has a co-credit between another composer and Stephen Schwartz. I should have started saying this without really knowing that.
I think they had to add some themes and expand it a little, so that makes sense.
Right.
Jen, just don't lose sight of that happy moment when Elton John opened the envelope and saw Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. And just remember, one of those three people got nominated for an Oscar today.
Yeah, I was going to say that moment apparently only helped Elton John because people were really endeared by his very happy reaction. He was so excited that he got to read their names off, and that apparently did not actually help the winners of that award, just him. So
I do want to note that Stephen Schwartz, who a great composer, deserves to get some accolades. Already has 8 Oscar nominations with 3 wins. So it's not like he's just getting they're just getting around to him. But 2 Pocahontas related wins and a Prince of Egypt original song, and then a few other Disney movies along the way.
I mean, that's a drop in the bucket compared to John Williams, right? So clearly they're okay with nominating someone over and over again that they like.
That is true. And Reznor and Ross have won at least twice, I think. That's
Social Network.
I don't know if they've won twice. They've at least been nominated twice, maybe more.
Okay.
Because they won for Soul, I want to say.
Yes, they won for Soul, they won for Social Network, and they were also nominated, of course, for Mank, that memorable score, the same year as Soul. So that's their record. So the fact they only have 3 nominations across the last 15 years shows they're not as in with the branch as Stephen Schwartz may be. But since we talked about original song, I have not listened to the Elton John song, nor have I watched the documentary. With all due respect to Elton John, I will do both at some point. And I don't think that this was bubbling in at number 6, but I had been holding out hope that Kneecap Sick in the Head would get into original song. And I had even more, I think, actually founded hope that it might get into international feature, neither of which happened. So outside of Hard Truths, that's my other my other bugaboo. My top, those 2 movies are in, I think, my top 7 or 8 for my personal list of the year. So I had hoped they would be nominated. I thought that would be good. I am not allowed, because we want to maintain our podcast ratings, to say what Kneecap posted, but it was about the Oscars and what they can do.
Oh no!
Themselves. So I think all in good fun is my guess, that they were not I don't know if they were actually that upset so much as they thought it would be funny, and I think they were right.
My hope is that Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Kneecap, hopefully they just clean up at the BAFTAs now, because people know that they're not going to be in it for the Oscars and that this is their one chance to reward them. So I'm hoping that at least has a positive ripple effect in that direction, because Kneecap did get a ton of nominations at BAFTA. So, and Marianne Jean-Baptiste not competing against Fernando Torres at BAFTA. So there's hope. There's hope there at least.
Well, my big disappointment of the day, I'm gonna pick a movie again. Sing Sing. Particularly Sing Sing missing out on Best Picture to me is a tragedy. And then more specifically, Clarence Macklin missing is a big blow, because I thought that film is something really special. And if people are listening to this right after our Brutalist episode, they heard me praising the marketing team at A24 for the efforts behind that film. So I will go ahead and say they did a terrible job with Sing Sing, and this whole rollout just seems totally miscalculated. The summer release without a big push just meant it got kind of lost, and then they are doing really interesting, innovative things in like mid-January when nobody has the extra bandwidth to pay attention to them. So I think this movie deserved better and should have gotten at least those two awards I mentioned on top of some others. It comes away with 3 total, so that must be Coleman Domingo, adapted screenplay, and
Song. It has the song.
That's right.
Which was also a big surprise. Nobody was predicting that.
Well,
I was predicting that, Jen.
Wait, you were?
I did. Yeah.
All right. Well, good for you. Congrats.
Yeah, I don't know.
I was surprised to see Clarence Macklin gets a nomination as a screenplay writer, right?
Yes,
He's won, he and Divine G, both characters in the film get, but the real human beings get to get nominated for that. So so it's not a blank, but I had much higher hopes for that movie when we saw it, and I just really think it got bungled.
It does feel.
I would agree.
Go ahead, Jen. I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say it does feel like that there's an alternate reality where that movie is, just handled better in all the ways that you're talking about. Just has a straightforward distribution, a more classic release strategy in the fall as an award season contender, and it feels like it would pretty easily get at least into the Best Picture. Lineup, and I think would have probably gotten Clarence Macklin in, maybe one or two other things. It could have built up some momentum. I think that when we talk eventually about what's the state of the race and what are the sort of corners people are trying to claim in with that the movies are taking and the paths they have to go forward, that Sing Sing would have a clear path if it hadn't sort of fumbled all over itself. And I feel like I don't know if this was an intentional experiment of like, we're going to try this different way. It sounded like what people were saying on the things I was listening to was like, they almost wanted like to go have the movie only be seen in screenings with someone from the movie there to talk about it afterwards, to like increase the effect it would have on the Academy voters in attendance. And if that was a deliberate strategy, it was not successful. And so I think that, it will be something that is brought up frequently going forward, in the same way that I think Selma is, as like Selma was that movie where it's like, oh yeah, they didn't release it soon enough and they didn't get screeners out in time. And there was these mistakes and logistical problems that held that movie back, and maybe things would have been different without it. I think Sing Sing it'll be similar, but in the other direction of it was too early and then it was too late when they tried to bring it back.
Yeah, I think if you think about the timeline of the year, right, they acquired Sing Sing at not this past film festival cycle, but the one year before. So they were holding it for this award season. And for the first half of the year, they probably thought that Sing Sing was going to be their main awards push, right? But then during this fall, they acquired The Brutalist, which who knows like whether or not they thought they were going to do that, right? So I think it does read to me like they had a plan for Sing Sing that was like a very long game by releasing it in the summer and then doing another big push at the end of the Oscar season, like right around now, which, as Greg said, we're seeing evidence of that, and it's just too little too late. But I think what probably disrupted that whole plan was The Brutalist, and they were like, "Wait a minute, like we have this film now, and maybe we need to be prioritizing that." So I think, many critics were concerned about the how many films that A24 had on its potential awards plate, and so I think Sing Sing is the major casualty of that. But who were some other winners from today? We've mentioned a couple. Wicked overperformed. Complete Unknown overperformed. But were there any other big winners that you want to spotlight?
Well, I think there are definitely a few movies that were maybe like smaller winners that are worth discussing, that at least in terms of nomination totals. I will say the big winner that is, I think it's still big, is The Substance, which did the thing. It did what people were questioning if it could do, which was break through in more than just the Demi Moore category. It was, it's in screenplay, it's in actress, it's in director, it's in picture, and makeup, right? Makeup and hairstyling. So yeah, it seemed like it might just be makeup and hairstyling and lead actress for Demi Moore, but it went beyond that. It broke some of the expectations that maybe we shouldn't have anymore about some of the genre question marks that, that maybe the new Academy will, in the right circumstances, support genres where it's like, usually it would be like, well, no, they're not going to nominate a weird Cronenberg-ish movie that has all this body horror elements. But if you have a really famous movie star in it and another up-and-coming movie star, and it's this French sensibility, but it's about Hollywood, this is a really good mix, and it has success at big famous international film festivals before it comes out. This is all a good success for it to actually move forward. So, I don't know if it has changed, in terms of being a favorite in anything besides the two categories that it has a really strong chance in, but great for the Academy, great for the narratives overall, that like, yes, this kind of movie, this kind of weird, we've been getting more weird in, it feels like, and this kind of weird is also included now, and that's nice.
Yeah, I think Everything Everywhere All at Once walked so The Substance could run. Maybe not to say it's going to win Best Picture or anything like that, but that I definitely see the trend. Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe Everything Everywhere else ran, so Substance could shuffle and behind it, right? But the point is there that the weird is welcome now, and I think that's right. I didn't have much hope for Margaret Qualley, just because of how crowded that category is, but it seems like she is, just one of those ingenue types all of a sudden that every director wants to get into their movies, and she's already worked with a Cohen. Is she working again with the same Cohen or the other Cohen this year? She's in a
same Cohen,
forthcoming Cohen. Same
Ethan.
Cohen. She
Ethan,
picked her Cohen and stuck with it. And then
loyal.
And Yorgos, obviously, with the last two of his films and so on. So I think she'll be okay. I think she's just fine. And I was really excited that made it in for director. I was really worried we were going to get, well, it's just too weird, and oops, we found a fifth man that we liked more. So it was great that she got it.
Craig, do you have any other winners?
Well, breaking news from my watch moments ago. My mom watched nominations this morning and ran out to watch the 688 and loved it. So it's so funny because that's the lane of like everybody who can just watch a nice movie at home and doesn't like to go to the movie theaters, like, is so excited about that movie in my life. Like, all these people reach out and talk, and just shout out Diane Warren, which is what who got that film its nomination this morning, which is hilarious. I know I watched that movie. I might have even like turned off the credits, forgetting that I was probably watching it to hear that song. So I'll have to give it a listen again. I think there are a lot of kind of mid-range, winners. I would put Wild Robot in that category. I don't think it was totally unexpected, but for it to come out this morning with 3 and kind of get to stand head and shoulders, robot arms and shoulders above Inside Out 2, I think just is a win for DreamWorks. This category, animated feature as a category tends to favor the cooler auteur products, but the fact that DreamWorks is still out here producing really good films with their, are they Despicable Me? No, with whatever money they have, their Shrek money, their Puss in Boots money, they do something original
How to Train Your Dragon?
How to Train Your Dragon,
They have a lot
wherever
of
they
money.
get their money. Yeah, they're doing fine. Don't worry about DreamWorks. But it's great that Wild Robot, a film I think a lot of us really liked, kind of overperformed its numbers as well.
Oh, they have trolls too. Yeah, they're they
They're
don't need
doing
anything.
fine.
Yeah, they're doing just fine. Yeah, and I'd say
I
this.
actually think we named a lot of other studios movies.
Other
in that,
studios?
so
No.
we're
I
bad.
just googled it.
Okay.
No, it's
Alright.
Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, and Trolls are their big ones. But it's Illumination does Despicable Me, apparently.
Oh, that's true. Okay, so that
That's
one's
where I
wrong.
messed up.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, the sound nomination specifically is what really threw me for a loop, and I was like, "Whoa! Like what? What does that mean?" So actually, now that you're pointing that out, I had originally been like, "Oh, Flow is the front runner because it got nominated in 2 different categories," but that's also true of Wild Robot now, right? Because it showed up in sound. No one was predicting that.
It's also in.
It didn't. But it missed in song. That was the place I had it.
But it got score.
But it's at score. It got score instead of song.
Right.
I don't remember the song. Fly on,
Is the
little
sky-
duckling, into the sky. I don't know.
Oh, I look.
Whatever it was, didn't
Songs
stick
not
with me.
being memorable is a theme of this whole collection of nominees. So don't worry about it.
I mean, that they should just they've decided that they're going to not have live performances of these nominees during the broadcast. They should just play Greg's clip saying that just now. That would be sufficient.
Just have Conan make up improvise a song for each movie. I think would totally work.
Oh, that would be amazing. So while we're talking about song, actually, I'm just looking at my list. I pour one out for Will and Harper. Because Harper and Will Go West didn't get in song. I had actually taken it out of documentary a little while ago because I was like, this is too mainstream. It's not, the documentary branch is not going to go for this. It's very, very rare that people were making the argument that because of the subject matter and that it's not totally focused on Will Ferrell, that it was like an exception to the, like, they don't do celebrity docs rule. But I ultimately, I was like, no, that's not happening. It's going to be like the Jean-Baptiste documentary last
American
year.
Story? Is that what it was called?
I think so. It didn't get in the documentary category, but the song got nominated. And I was like, well, maybe they'll do that. They'll be like, oh, we got this movie covered because it's in song, and it doesn't even have that. So it's a missed opportunity. What do you two think about the no live performances during the telecast? Like, does that make sense? Does that make sense this year? Like,
I'm actually fine with it. I think, what I like, if I was the producer of the telecast, I really like the like opening song full of jokes type thing, or the
Billy
classic
Crystal model.
Billy Crystal, yeah, that kind of builds something like that. But I often find, despite the quality of many of the song nominees, those are my bathroom breaks. Those are my, well, maybe we do have ice cream in the freezer moments, and I go a searching and a wandering. The Billie Eilish performance comes to mind. And I've been watching it in a movie theater the last 2 years, and that still is my moment to be like, I wonder if this movie theater has a fridge, and go see if they have ice cream. So I'm actually okay with it. I think for me, the Song Awards are not. They are a part of the movies, but they are so often that kind of barely connected, not that interesting that I don't feel like that a celebration of a night of film has to include the songs. It is a little bit of a weird year. You speculated that maybe Selena or Zoe Saldana said, I'm absolutely not performing, and that's why they wanted to get away from this. But it is interesting that they made that announcement yesterday before the nominations came out. So it wasn't even like they negotiated with the nominees or something. At least one would assume.
Yeah, so I tried to do a little bit of reading about this when I had a couple moments of free today, and apparently they're not getting rid of original song segments altogether. So it's not like we're getting back tons of minutes, which I was disappointed by, because I was like, well, at least this will free up. Like maybe we'll get some clips montages. Like I was like, look at all what are all these other things that are actually related to the movies that we can add back in now. But it turns out they're just going to do like a behind the scenes featurette about the songwriters and the writing of the songs, like the making of each song, each nominee. So that I don't know. I feel like part of me when I saw this news was completely confused, because I was like, this is the year we have a bunch of musicals. So why are we not doing live performances? Like that doesn't make sense. But then I started to think, and I was like, well, but all of the people who arguably would be in demand for those performances are also nominated in acting categories, or in the case of Selena Gomez, could have been nominated but awkwardly wasn't. So maybe they were just like, no, we can't make them do that. Because if you think about it, like that would be really awkward if like this is not going to happen, but Zoe Saldana performs El Mal, which is a very high energy, like high risk potentially performance, because the song is like really intense. She's got to do a ton of dancing. She's hopping on tables, right? And then cut to she loses for supporting actress, right? Like that would be very weird and kind of like create like a weird, create a bad. It would be like Anthony Hopkins winning over Chadwick Boseman all over again, kind of. Not to that degree, but like that kind of moment where you're like, oh, wah. So PT's delighted by this idea.
That sounds incredible. No, I want Zoe Saldana to win.
But do you see what I'm saying though? Like,
I do. Yeah, although my only like counter to that would be, usually what happens is I feel like the most famous person who's nominated an original song goes last, and then they give out the award. So there's always like Lady Gaga has just finished, or Billie Eilish has just finished, and then they open it and see what happened. Or I think last year it wasn't Billie Eilish, it was I'm Just Ken finished, and then they opened it. They were like, not I'm Just Ken, the other song from Barbie, and everyone's like, oh, okay. So I do see that, and the fact that it's, I mean, again, Ryan Gosling did do it last year. I think he'd already lost Best Supporting Actor, so it didn't matter time-wise in the event. But it could be a thing that happens, and the fact that the two Emilia Perez songs are so tied to high energy choreographed performances by the actor, which my guess is they were never singing the song while they were doing those dances. So it's also like, could you actually match that up there? But I'm sure they could if they trained on that for a long time, but I don't think that's necessarily where they're going to put their energies for the next few weeks. So the thing that I will say is the announcement was they're not going to do performances of the Best Original Song nominees, which, I mean, to me, I immediately took away from that saying they're going to perform other songs from Emilia Perez and other songs from Wicked, so we could get some Wicked songs in. So there will be performances, but it won't be like tied to the original songs, because then it's like, are we going to do 5 original songs and then we're going to do like 1 or 2 Wicked numbers, and then suddenly we have like 40 minutes maybe of music? Like, I don't know. So now they can just sort of compact it down and maybe either turn it into part of the Conan thing, but still let people hear Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande sing, and maybe some of the Emilia Perez people. Or, they're just sidestepping all of these issues for this year and seeing what happens. I think I have said before, like, we can get rid of the songs. The songs are nice, and when they nominate someone that I'm into, I'm like, great. Like, that's like, I'm glad to see them, and I'm glad they get this attention, and it is part of the awards, and they do deserve it. But like Greg, I'm pretty checked out. I'm in the other room. Greg, they do have refrigerators and freezers at the movie theater. You have to pay $12 to get the ice cream bar, is the only catch. But like it is that moment, and part of me is like, oh, if they're really desperate to cut a little bit of time, that would be that's the way to do it, instead of doing what they've done in the past, which is like, let's not show more than 10 seconds of an actor's performance, or not 10, like, let's not show more than 2 seconds of an actor's performance like they did at the Globes. And give some more from these movies, give some more from the performances. And the costumes, the sound, like get into all of that a little bit more, what this craft actually means. It's sometimes, my general feeling is they're desperately trying to bring in people who don't really care about the Oscars to keep watching the Oscars the way they would have 25 years ago. And instead of doing that, like, why don't you cater to the people who are like, I do want to know about movies. I do want to know how they're made. What do these people do? And the songs are aimed more at the former group than the latter. But, I don't think this is permanent. My guess is this will be, reverted back probably when it's a collection of performers where it's easier to have them perform the songs than the ones this year are.
They may also be trying to make more time, because I know I joked that they're not saving us a ton of time because they're replacing the performances with these behind the scenes segments, but those are probably still shorter than the actual performances, and maybe they're trying to make time for, honoring first responders for the wildfires, raise, like, telling people how they can contribute and raise money or help, right? Like, so, which is all very valuable and they should be doing. And I think so that, like, yeah, so I agree. This is probably a temporary measure for some reason because they're trying to do something to address the wildfires and aid and that kind of thing, and make it more of a, because everyone has called for that. Everyone's like, well, clearly you have to turn the Oscars into some kind of telethon, right? Otherwise, like, what are we doing? So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think, it'll be interesting. There's always something weird that they try to do with the ceremony to, like, reinvent it every year. So I look forward to scratching our heads about whatever that is.
Did you see that in terms of saving time or not saving time, they are bringing back the 5 former winners coming out to introduce every nominee for the acting categories? So that may take up all the song time that is saved between the
That's true.
cutting from the performances
I
to the
kind of like
behind the
those
scenes
though.
thing.
I love those. I'm here for that. I'm with you, Jen. Like, my favorite is when it's like 2 people with a really heartfelt connection that have worked together over 30 years, and then immediately followed by somebody who's like, I saw your movie once. It was pretty good.
Yes.
Congrats on this one. No, I would, I am very much in the Sean Fennessy camp of, people will watch the Super Bowl from like 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. So let's just make the Academy Awards as long as we want it to be, and who cares, right? So, so I don't think it's a time saving measure. I think you're right. They'll fill the time. It'll be the same kind of normal lengthy ceremony. But if you can put a little more focus on the craft, all the crafts across them, I think that's worthwhile. I'll just also throw that out there. I'm thinking like a producer. You're cutting back on something that's really, really expensive. And Conan's super power is to do something really cheap and point out its cheapness and make that a feature, not a bug. And so it seems to me he could make hay out of all of that. If they really want to kind of lean into, we took the feather boa budget and gave it to the first responders, I think they'll just be applauded for it. So that's also me throwing in that Last Showgirl did not get nominated. So down with the feather boas. We don't need them. Get out, back to Vegas.
Yeah, wasn't that crazy when everyone jumped on that ship that Jamie Lee Curtis was going to get nominated, including me? I jumped right with the rest of them.
When I traded all my favors with my wife so that I could go on a noon screening of that movie on Monday because I was, terrified I was going to miss it. Yeah, real strange. No regrets on that one.
But at least you saw a movie that moved you, and you're glad that you engaged with it.
Moved me to yell, get the camera out of the actress's face. Just like 2 feet back. Just get it back. Like, we would like to know where these people are and what is happening around them, not just that their faces are faces.
Just before we go too deep into, because I think Last Showgirl is one of the losers that we could talk about. Just a real quick, the last couple of winners I think we didn't mention. Nosferatu overperformed a little bit. It has 4 nominations. I think people were thinking 1 to 3, and it got all 3 that they thought it could have, and also a little bit more. It has makeup and hairstyling, costume design, production design, and cinematography. So I think people thought cinematography was pretty safe. the designs were possible, and the makeup I think was a bit of a surprise. So good for them. And then also 2 above the line nominations for The Apprentice for Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan, which was coming along, but like maybe this was me being in denial because I don't want to see this movie because we're living in it instead. So I didn't. I was like, I don't know if that's really going to happen, but it did. So a win for sure for that movie that seemed dead in the water a while ago that no one was really talking about it, and like Sebastian Stan had to he got traction out of the fact that he was saying no one will talk about this movie with me because people don't want to even like acknowledge its existence. So it's acknowledged and it has 2 nominations. So good for The Apprentice.
I'll just jump in to say that both of those performances are really good. It is not a perfect film whatsoever, but it is it's meaningful and it's really helpful and to like unlock the psychosis of the man who is leading our country again. And call me crazy, PT has expressed the very real fear that Trump discourse will overwhelm the Oscars discourse this year because of this nomination, and I think we all deserve a little escapism and not being stuck in Trump discourse. But I don't know. The fact that it is well known that the sitting president raped his first wife, and there's a movie playing in theaters that shows that, seems like it's a worthwhile bit of discourse to get into, something that maybe some parts of our country should have to grapple with a little more. There are no new revelations in The Apprentice. It's just really, the facts laid bare. So I want to hear Jen's comments on what this means for the traditional best actor, best makeup predictors, because it's a little screwy. But Jen's intro to me was exactly right. I still was rooting for a different man. I think Sebastian Stan turned in 2 great performances this year. I'm glad he's recognized, but I'm a little sad it was this one.
Yeah, I mean, I have sort of 2 thoughts in terms of explaining these nominations, and one is something I've had for a while now, even before the Globes, where I was like, you know what? Like, Europeans think this is all hilarious. Like, because they are far enough removed from the situation that they're just like, wow, isn't this fascinating? What's going on with America, right? Like, and so I've always thought that with international voting bodies that The Apprentice would actually do pretty well, even though because they just don't have the same sort of baggage and apprehension about it that Americans do. So there's that. So that's kind of why I had both Stan and Strong in my predictions, and it turned out to be right in both counts, which feels great. At least there's that. And so the other piece of it, which is what Greg's trying to prompt me to talk about, is historically there is a correlation, not always, but when there's a nomination in makeup and hairstyling that matches with an acting nomination, that oftentimes indicates a sign of strength, or that the person's more likely to win in their category, because people associate sort of the transformation of the makeup and hairstyling with the performance, and it's all like this big Oscar soup that people are like, yes, let's vote for that. So the tricky thing is that Sebastian Stan got nominated for The Apprentice in actor, but makeup and hairstyling, the nomination is for A Different Man, another movie he was in, right? So whether or not the stat will kind of hold, or if it does mean the thing it usually means in terms of strength in the race, we'll have to see.
Or if Demi Moore gets that bump, right?
That was the next thing I was going to say. I think the correlation is actually much stronger for Demi Moore, because people are going to associate the makeup and hairstyling work in that film, especially the monster Eliza Sue. Wow. I hadn't had to think about that for a little while, and it just hit me. It looks so crazy. But yeah, so like I think that is actually the one that's more likely to result in a win, because she's already in pretty strong frontrunner status after the Golden Globes. So that's where I think that'll go. But I've heard multiple people say that even though nominally Stan is nominated for The Apprentice, that functionally it reflects kind of people just endorsing his year. that it's not officially right. Like the Oscars doesn't do cumulative awards for like your work for the year or anything like that. But that's essentially what voters are thinking. Because the flip side that people were kind of worried about, people who weren't predicting him to get nominated, we're saying like that it would be a vote splitting situation. Oh, who are they going to vote for him? Some people are going to say A Different Man. Some people are going to say The Apprentice, so he's not going to get in. But it does seem like it's the opposite now, where it's like, oh, he's in because people support him, and both movies they kind of respect the work he's done for both. So we'll see. I think once the nomination probably was the biggest hurdle for him. Depending on what happens between now and March 2nd, like he could emerge as it could become a 3-way race with him. I can see it.
An unlikely, but also present third choice for the makeup and lead connection is Wicked, because Wicked's nominated in makeup and hairstyling, and Cynthia Erivo got in for actress, which was one of those things that was like, that was uncertain a while ago, and then suddenly it was like, of course, like she's locked in, and then the last few weeks it was like, well, maybe like she might actually have fallen out because maybe Wicked is kind of peaked, but she's there and Wicked is there, so it's not likely. There's no sort of like current momentum in that direction, but I think that part of the interesting thing about this year is that there's been a lot of momentum in different directions, but at least currently, even though maybe we are in the middle of a clear trajectory for one of these movies, it is never felt like it was clear that, like, in the way the last 2 years, it was like, we're on the train for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then we're on the train for Oppenheimer. That we don't have that, and like, it could be that Wicked ends up getting, really stomping forward and getting a bunch of things, and that could be part of it, is the makeup and the lead actress.
You're also making me realize that we can say the same thing about Amelia Perez, right? Because I think my understanding of that makeup and hairstyling campaign is that it's mainly focused on the transformation of Carla Sofia Gascon from Manitas to Amelia Perez, right? So like this makeup and hairstyling category is more crowded with acting noms than I would have expected.
So Nosferatu will win, and that'll just make it easier.
There you go.
On the
and
night.
Then we'll throw everything into chaos.
Be like,
yeah.
All right, there we go. Jen, did you have any big losers that we have not talked about? We've been talking about them here and there, but
I would say a real pain, because it didn't get into Best Picture. I don't think we've talked about that yet. It did get a screenplay nomination, and Kieran Culkin, of course, is still, I think, the front runner for supporting actor. But the fact that it missed picture, and some people were saying, well, if it's in picture, why wouldn't maybe Jesse Eisenberg pop up as a surprise nom? Why wouldn't it maybe it would get into editing, right? Like, so people were kind of thinking it could. No one, I don't think anyone was solidly predicting it, but people were saying, well, it could overperform if it isn't Best Picture. But it seems we've gone the other direction now, right? It missed. It's basically just its only chance is probably screenplay, other than Kieran Culkin.
That's the only other nomination it has.
Right. So like, right, that's true. So right, like Kieran Culkin is pretty strong. That could be its only win.
Right.
That's what I was going to say. It feels like it's become one of those movies where we all like this movie. We're going to give it the one nomination to represent the amount we like this movie. Let's move on. And I do think that's a real shame. That's another one very high on my list for, the year.
It does feel like it would be a really good screenplay winner, so it's too bad that it's probably not going to at this point.
Well, and the main reason I don't immediately say like, yes, of course I agree, is because, I think it's shaky to call them both losers in the short term, but in the long term, over the last, 3 to 6 months, Dune Part 2 and Anora, two of my favorites of last year, both like held on to what they needed to hold on to, but like did not exceed what, like, there was no sort of sudden like, actually there's all this love for them, and they got into a couple more categories than you thought. Maybe Anora got that with editing. I think the editing, they were pretty much in there already anyway. And I think there's still definitely a path for, not definitely. I think there's still a unlikely but possible path for Anora. And not so much for Dune Part 2. It feels like both of those movies are going to be like you were just talking about, where it's like, they have some more nominations, but it's going to be like, okay, like we're going to dole out our awards for people. Like, we like this movie. A Real Pain, here you go. You get Best Supporting Actor. Honora, here you go. You get Original Screenplay. Like Dune Part 2, here's your visual effects and maybe one other craft thing. But like, that's
Nickel
it.
Boys, here's your adapted screenplay.
Dune 2 didn't have enough CGI monkeys. Can't give it.
No, the
visual
monkey
effect.
vote is going to cancel.
I'm really
I choose to
bummed
believe
that-
P2 didn't freeze. He's just so mad at me that his brain just broke.
I was really bummed that my vote all monkeys strategy did not pan out completely because Gladiator 2 missed visual effects. So I had better. Yeah, I was like, oh, let's just go first. Let's list all the movies with the monkeys. Let's Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Better Man, and which in case you're listening, you don't know, stars Robbie Williams, pop star Robbie Williams, but as a monkey. And then Gladiator 2, which has those bit crazy looking baboons. Gladiator 2 missed.
And Wicked, which has flying monkeys.
But it did get into costume, so it didn't go home empty handed.
The Napoleon
that was
path,
weird,
right? No, Napoleon got 2.
It did less.
I think.
It did less than but Napoleon had 3.
3.
So
okay. I don't just because we'll never talk about it again. I saw Better Man. You would not believe how good the effect of the monkey is.
I've heard that.
Like, it is like they broke the bank. It like one of the things I remember. This is going back a while, but like when they were doing the Chronicles of Narnia movies, and you were like, oh, they spent all the money on the lion, and everything else looks really crappy. It was like that. It was like, oh my god, like they spend everything on this monkey. I never once didn't believe that there was a monkey sitting in these rooms and in these spaces. And yet, like, I watched the whole movie. I heard him explain that he feels like a trained monkey. And yet I do not understand why this is the movie they chose to make with their money and their time. It is not a horrible movie, but it is like just absurd. But the effects absolutely deserve that nomination. God bless you, monkey. I actually think it's better than Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I did only see that once way back when it came out, but I think the effect is better in Better Man because it's out of context, right? Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes ends up feeling like Avatar, right? Because you're just in a totally fake environment, whereas this is at times a monkey in a very real space.
Great follow-up to Godzilla -1 winning this category last year. I'm being sarcastic.
I'm still not 100% sure Robbie Williams is a real person. Like, I understand
that's why they
England,
made it a monkey.
Well, I understand in England he's a big deal, but like it was funny. Like the trailer happened and Jasmine was like, "I love all these songs" because she really likes British like culture and music, and I was like, "I've never heard a single note of any of these songs. This is wild." That's just another log on the fire. The non-Wicked fire of just sort of like everyone acting like there's good songs that are happening and it's like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? But all due respect to the monkey effects do look really good. So I'm glad he got in, or they all got in.
I did not love the musical numbers, but I will say there is one that exceeded everything for me. There's one musical number that exceeded everything in Wicked and everything in Amelia Perez. If there was a best musical number, sequence, choreography Oscar, I would give it to Robbie Williams singing one of his hit songs I'd never heard before with a bunch of other boy band members who I don't even remember the name of the boy band, but they are it's done as a oneer going down High Street into Piccadilly Circus. I forget what that street is called, but like into stores, out of stores, into double-decker buses, around cars. It was totally awesome. So check it out. Better Man, your CG Monkey Champion of the Year, according to Greg.
Amazing. PT, do you want to take this opportunity to tell us your theories about Best Picture?
Sure. That sounds like a great idea. So the way that I was saying this to our to Jen and Greg and also I think texted it was in the text, so I think Antonio was there as well, was that like the picture is clearer. We can talk a little bit about like who's a front runner, who's not, what's changed, etc. So we do have a clearer picture now, but it feels unlike recent years. And part of the conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, is that like there are a lot of paths forward for the movies that have been nominated for Best Picture. and they're paths with precedence, and they're the kind of things where, you know, when we come to the day after or the night of Oscars, we could look back and be like, oh yeah, like I guess that does make sense. Like that was always going to win, like even though we weren't certain what was going on. So I will say, with obviously with Love, the only one that I did not see any kind of a path or parallel to is the movie that has to be happy that it won the True People's Award, The Letters, and that's Dune Part 2, which I just don't think has enough support anywhere for all the things that needed to happen should have happened already. And it's not there now. It would just be this crazy, like, that would be a ranked choice, like insanity that everyone put it like fourth, and all the other movies were canceling each other out long enough for that to matter. But you know, in terms of front runners, like the clear, I mean, just numbers wise, most nominations, the clear front runner is Emilia Perez, and you know, won a Best Picture at Golden Globes, has you know, for better or for worse, it can be discussed, and it likely will be more going forward. You know, touches on these social issues and is sort of the moment. If you you know, there's some people who don't like it. There's some degree of a curled finger of a monkey's paw of we need an international voting body, and what are they going to vote for? They're going to help us choose better movies, and you know, it has a very good chance that it could win. If you like it, it's Chicago. Again, if you don't really like it, but you're being generous, it's Green Book. And, you know, if you are not generous, it's Crash. And that's, you know, that's sort of that movie's path forward. The Brutalist is the other front runner because, you know, coming off the Golden Globe win, has this sort of big epic storytelling, gets sort of placed in with great American saga epics. If you like it, it's The Godfather. If maybe you don't like it as much, it's Forrest Gump, movies that had like another strong contender, but it still won and sort of has the like American story going to it. These are sort of in order of what I think is the likelihood of it. But I think still likely Wicked, Blockbuster, Loved by Many, got double-digit nominations. We said already going above and beyond. A beloved franchise from the Broadway show also could make the argument it's a makeup win for The Wizard of Oz in 1939 that didn't get there. It's not quite Titanic, but it's in that ballpark. And it's also not quite Chicago or My Fair Lady or the original West Side Story. But again, like it's a mix of all of those. It's the blockbuster plus the big Broadway musical coming in and winning. Then there's a complete unknown, which is The Rising Star. Both the movie is in the awards race and also the star of the movie is like The Rising Star. It's like a victory lap for boomers, but it features Gen Z, early Gen Alpha stars. So it's like a baton passing, solid, basic Hollywood fare, done really well. Feels like a movie people can just rally around if they're not like certain about all the issues happening in the current movies. They can just look back and be like, in the 60s, we got it right. And it could be Amadeus for folk/rock music. So, you know, that feels like that has a path forward there. Honora is like, we're starting to fall out of like, okay, like some things need to happen, but the longtime front runner that faded but held on where it needed to has the sort of credibility of winning some festivals, sort of forgotten fades in the later precursors. But if audiences feel like, well, we need to reward an American story that's got some foreign flavoring and it talks about class issues, and we want to reward an up and coming filmmaker, and we don't want to give it to The Brutalist, then maybe they come back to thinking about Honora because there's some controversies around The Brutalist now. So a little bit of spotlight vibes, and maybe only wins one or two other awards, but takes the big one in a sort of night of shuffling around and suddenly like surprises at the end where the smaller movie suddenly wins. Somewhat similar, Conclave, hanging around. It's just been hanging around. Some classic storytelling, but with some weird twists, sort of the church of it all, as well as some of the things that happen in the story. In the end, especially via preferential ballot, it emerges as an unexpected compromise candidate, even though the strong proponents of the other movies around it will say it's as a strange combination of being both too safe and too weird to have beaten the movies they love. It's The Shape of Water. It's the path for A Shape of Water, with the director snub adding a dash of Argo on top of it. It might need a precursor or two between now and then for this to start to come together, but it wins SAG Ensemble. It pulls some things in some other areas. Who knows? Like it could pull that off. Then Hollywood loves movies about itself. The Substance, maybe it feels rewarding. This movie atones for some previous sins against women. It gives a woman-directed movie Best Picture, which it has not done often enough. It's got the international Euro appeal through its French roots. Maybe it will look back and say the question was, could it get in? But once it was there, it just sort of took everything by storm. It combines the Academy doesn't reward weird genre movies like this, of Everything Everywhere All at Once, with, well, we make exceptions for horror movies sometimes, of The Silence of the Lambs, and adds in a dash of a psychological horror story starring a famous Hollywood star that we want to reward, of Black Swan. The last couple, which again, we're really far on the outside here, but sometimes ones on the outside can pull it off. Nickel Boys. Once people see it, they will think, oh, well, this needs to be rewarded. It was under-nominated because it was underseen. If there's a dramatic increase in questions around imprisonment and prison labor in America in the next couple of weeks and months before we get to the end of voting, this is sort of got potentially another dash of Spotlight, a movie that won screenplay and picture, and that's it, as well as Coda, a movie that was overlooked going into nominations and only got a few, but then swept everything it was nominated for. Finally, Brazilians on the march for I'm Still Here. They rally. The momentum is sort of there. More straight Coda vibes. Once people see it, they'll feel they have to vote for it, especially if the questions of political prisoners and rising authoritarian states becomes trenchant for voters, and they really connect with this. It has 3 categories. Coda had 3 categories. They're not the same, but is there a chance that it could pull it off? It's not likely, but if it happens and we look back on any of these, I feel like it could be like, oh yeah, well, all right, I guess that was there all along. So those bottom 4, maybe 5 here would need some change, some things to keep happening in the next few weeks. But yeah, that was sort of my biggest takeaway from today, was just how, well, like there's except for I think Dune Part 2, there's no movie that's stuck in like, well, congratulations, like you just got nominated. Like they probably will. Like Nickel Boys, I'm Still Here will probably just be happy to have been invited, but it's possible. Like there's something there, and there's some history that can support it. So that was my spiel.
Wow. Now I'm really convinced we still don't have any kind of front runner, because those were all pretty compelling cases. My counter to some of what you said is, sure, all those paths do seem possible and make sense. But I think in terms of looking at this as a set of nominations and what story it's trying to tell, you kind of have to, and especially with this open a race, like you kind of have to be on the lookout for the movies that are, or the Best Picture nominees that are popping up in places we didn't expect. And I think that arguably that's usually what you want to look for anyway. But I think in a year like this, that probably becomes even more important as a sign. When I'm thinking now, which movies did that, I'd say Wicked is probably number 1, because it showed up in editing, which I was not expecting, and it got score, which I wasn't really expecting. On the bottom of my spreadsheet, past the like, I'm predicting this line, I just have Wicked ? For score. Like, would they do that? Apparently, yes. So that's one. And the other thing too is oftentimes you want to look at the sound and editing as a pair, because historically those often go together. And so when I look at those 2 categories together,
it's Emilia Perez. Oh wait, no, hold on. Wicked is in both.
Yeah, Wicked is in both too. That's why I was ending with that, because I think Wicked is actually even stronger than I thought this morning. Now that the more that I look at the nominations as a whole, yeah, Wicked's here to play. I don't know, which is crazy. I was so dismissive of that before.
Well, the other 3 of us would go really behind Wicked from the beginning, and you've just been sour on it since. Yep, check the tape. Yep, she hated Wicked all year. It's so here's I am not as into punditry as Jen. I think PT and I consume about the same much, but maybe you've read a little bit more. But I will say this: I feel like Oscar pundits need to get their heads around Wicked and Amelia Perez being legitimate movies, right? Like, there's this kind of prevailing wisdom, like, yeah, it got 13, but like nobody really likes it, right? And of course, there are Netflix precedents to that. The Irishman comes to mind, right? Of a high total that doesn't equate to very many wins. But I think that as much as the Oscars have become a critics' body, I think that the voters still are showing a lot of love for those two films in particular. And I think it is, nomination day. I would say 50-50 that one of those or another movie gets Best Picture, right? Like, I think those are really in the mix towards the top. And a lot of people need to come to grips with what that means for, movie going. And, one thing I love about this podcast I listen to called The Long Take Review is we try to always remember that movies are about really smart, challenging art house fare, and they are about really dumb popcorn blockbusters too, right? And so I hope that, as I look at this group of 10, I see space for both sides of the movie coin, and I just hope that pundits don't alienate people by being. I agree with PT. We should not worry about attracting everybody to the Oscar telecast, but we also shouldn't actively make people feel dumb for loving Amelia Perez or Wicked, two perfectly wonderful, fine movies, even though they don't rise to the level of our favorites of the year. I say that bravely because Antonio's not on the call.
Yeah, I was gonna say Antonio's the one who likes Amelia Perez the most out of all of us. When we did our review, I was kind of next after him because I actually really enjoyed the music in this, and it has a bunch of issues and problems and of many sorts. But I think at the end of the day, I still appreciate kind of the big swing that it's taking and the bold vision that it has and what it was trying to do. Yes, it could learn from some of the things that it did and could take some notes from various groups and critics and but I think that's what people are responding to, is that it's just so bold and out there, and yes, it might be a hot mess. Right, but it's one that people want to watch and one that people want to talk about, and I think yeah, I think so. The thing I'm dreading the most probably about the rest of the Oscar season is exactly what you're describing, Greg, of people rolling their eyes and being like, I can't believe this got Amelia Perez got so many nominations. I can't believe we're actually talking about Wicked winning Best Picture, when they just need to get over it. Like that's like because clearly enough people like those movies that they're getting all these nominations, right?
So I conceptually agree with what both of you are saying, and I would like to officially file a motion to sever Wicked from Amelia Perez, because I think that Wicked does not deserve to be lumped in with that. I also think it's funny for Greg to say, like, oh, these aren't our favorite movies. And I was like, I think it is. It's one of Jen's, like, 3 favorite movies of the year, I believe, for Wicked. So she was not fighting for it as strong as maybe she should have during the letters, because she was acquiescing to in the same way that Antonio didn't fight much for Amelia Perez, because maybe the writing was on the wall from us boring regular dudes who were not embracing the musicals at the awards. But I think the critiques of Wicked are whatever. There's the visual color grading, cinematography questions around it, but I think it's mostly that's like, this is just part one, and people, the sort of Sean Fantasy thing of we're only rewarding half a movie, and that sort of sucks. But like, whatever, like, it's only because we know it's part one. Many movies have won Best Picture and then gotten a sequel for better or for worse or whatever, or great movies and got a sequel. And so, I don't know, whatever on all of that. I don't want to be the person that both of you are just lamenting about, but I will say the other main thought I had today was, despite thinking about all of that about these paths, because I do think it's really interesting, there wasn't like a super clear consolidation. And maybe there just couldn't have been, that there's still all these little paths because of some of these little quirks of narratives that happened before. And I guess I'm thinking of more just like looking at best pictures and seeing how they got there. Jen is right to look at the actual pieces along the way, which is the sign of a true prognosticator and pundit. Is like, no, but look at these categories and don't look at what's happened before. Look at what's happening right now. So that's very smart, and everyone should listen to Jen instead of what I was saying. But it got 13 nominations. Like, I don't know why we're not assuming Emilia Perez is going to be the Oppenheimer or Everything Everywhere All at Once of this year. It could, it is more likely statistically to win 7 to 8 to 7 to 9 wins than it is to get fewer than 4. So, it is probably going to win. And I will say this, and then I will drop it. And I warned Antonio, like, it will just immediately go into the ranks of one of the worst movies that has won Best Picture in the last 35, 40 years. So it goes into that conversation. And that's, it's very well intentioned. I understand why people would want to vote for it from a sort of social issue standpoint. But I just don't think it's very good. And I think there's a lot of really good movies this year that could be there from this list, like every other movie on the list. I'm presuming the one I haven't seen would be a better winner. But again, I'll try to not be like a jerk about it all the time. But I just think that, like, I was going through, and I won't recap all this because it's crappy. Of like, there's movies that it's like, oh, that one, this other movie should have won, so it's a bad win. The Shakespeare in Love maybe is a good one of that, like we were talking about earlier, where it's like, I don't know, like, I like that movie. That movie's really good, but it's, because of the around it, the politics around it in the actual Oscar campaigning, and the sort of legacy that Saving Private Ryan has had. People are saying, oh, that should have won. But then occasionally there are these movies that win, and it's like immediately everyone's like, oh no, like, what are we doing? Like, why did this happen? And that I do kind of feel like there will be a lot of people who think that way, but like, people had to like Crash when it won, because it won, and people had to like Green Book when it won, even though it felt like everybody, quote unquote, everybody said like, oh no, these are bad wins. But like, people say they like it, and people like it. They don't say they like it, like they don't mean it. People like it. They exist out in the world, and you're right, they should be respected. But I do think it will go into that, the Driving Miss Daisy, Crash, Green Book segment of winners. And that would be a shame for the end of the year for me, but people disagree. And that includes Antonio, who loves it. That includes Jen, who liked it quite a bit. And maybe includes Greg, who liked it more than I did. So that's that. But I think that's, barring any other changes going forward, despite all the things I said about the potential paths, I think we have to assume Emilia Perez is the front runner.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting question of, is it only not being discussed as a front runner because the people discussing its front runner status or not don't like it and are in denial about its status, right? I think that's a very legitimate question to be asking. My last counter, and then I think we'll wrap up, is that the comparison to I'm thinking a lot about the comparison you're making to Green Book, and I can definitely see the parallels in terms of the type of discourse or the response. I haven't actually yet seen the backlash to the backlash. Maybe that's still coming, of people being like, you know what? I don't like that people are telling me not to vote for this movie, so I'm going to vote for it harder. I haven't quite seen that yet. It's mostly just people being like, oh yeah, this is one of my favorite movies of the year, and then it gets in everywhere. So, but if I think about the actual content of the movie, I could see the parallels, how someone could draw parallels between them. But to me, at the end of the day, Green Book was a big part of its crimes had to do with how innocuous it presented itself as. You know what I mean? Like, how, like, oh, this is just a nice story. And like, isn't it great when people from different races can get along like this? And, like, look, isn't it nice? Like, it was like, it's sort of like vanilla nicety was its biggest problem, right? Whereas I feel like Emilia Perez, I can't really say the same thing, right? Because it's so wacky and out there and melodramatic in some places and trying to be serious in others, and like, like the types of songs that are in it maybe don't make sense all the time, and like, you know what I mean, like so I would be more inclined to say there's value in the risk taking that's involved in Amelia Perez that is just not at all present. And granted, I'm singling out one of the movies that you mentioned in comparison, but yeah. So
It's fair.
so
It's
like
a fair
I don't know.
point.
I don't know if they're the same, or maybe we should talk about them the same way. But I don't know if they're the same. Is my point.
Fair.
But we should end on something that's not us arguing, I guess. Greg, what are you most looking
Hey,
forward? Yes.
there are some really, really good movies on this list that people haven't seen, and I'll end by throwing a few of those out there. These would all be kind of towards the bottom of my list because they're single nominations. I think Seed of the Sacred Fig is pretty incredible and deserves to be seen by as many people as possible, both because it's just a good, gripping, tense movie, but then it was filmed completely in secret within Iran and snuck out of the country. And that is kind of jaw dropping when you see what they were able to achieve with that. I'll put in a plug for Memoir of a Snail, which is an absolutely absurd movie to be doing as well as it's doing. And like it's very quirky and very kind of small. It's beautiful animation and just like a story. If you've listened to our episodes this year on things like Dee Dee, it's actually kind of in that line. It's like, let me talk to you about somebody who's kind of a story we don't get to hear about, and it's really wonderful. I Jen plugged my socials. I tried to track down where everything was available. That one appears to be on AMC Plus, not the AMC theater chain, but the AMC channel, which still somehow has its own unique streaming service, which I never understand, but may be found there, maybe a part of that. And the last one I'll plug is soundtrack to a coup d'etat. Is a documentary unlike anything you've ever seen from a documentary. It is very much a jazz performance of the history of the Congo, and that is exactly what it is. But it doesn't sound like it makes sense. But that hit Canopy, which is free through your
Yeah.
local library or university system, and is so very accessible. And it's long. It's like 2.5 hours, and I got to a place where like 40 minutes in, it was like, I got this. I don't really need to finish this. Like I got what it's going for. But then it actually kind of turned a corner for me. I was like, oh, this is really building. So it's really good. Um, and I guess that's my list. There are some other films that I've plugged over and over again this year. So I will say, I think they did pretty well this year. There are definitely some omissions. There are definitely some misses. I think the best picture list is just wacky. Hasib, our dear listener, reached out and was like, "I don't know about this," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm with you, Hasib. This is a weird list at the top, but I think the overall list, 35 really solid features, 15 shorts, as always. It's a good list and worth people's time." Uh, I Jen, did I end positively enough? Go see the shorts. There's my other plug.
Oh yeah.
So I started looking up around theaters here, and it looks like by mid-February, what theaters do is they just package up each of the shorts categories together, and so it's the 5 animated, the 5 live action, and the 5 documentary. I always time it so I can see the 10 live action and animated in one night, and with dinner in between or drinks in between. It's a really fun time. They never let it get over 2 hours, so if it ends up being much shorter, sometimes they throw in a couple of the runners up or other shortlisted shorts. We got like 8 animated last year, but it's really fun, and you can sit there with your letterbox open, and every time the credits roll, you can kind of plug in your review and look at it and think about it. But you know, there are worse ways to spend your $15 movie ticket than seeing a group of 5 kind of young filmmakers, or maybe Wes Anderson experimenting with the form and playing around.
Nice.
Just out of curiosity, how many like do what Wes Anderson did and push right up to like 39 minutes and 40 seconds to be under the 40-minute mark, or are most of them in like a 15 to 20 minute zone?
I would say 20 to 30 is where most of them end up falling. I knocked out I tried to do the documentary not in the theater, and I knocked out most of those today. And I think The Only Girl in the Orchestra is 35 minutes. It was on
Okay.
Netflix. Really fun, really wonderful. Jen, strong recommend for you Instruments of a Bleeding Heart, which is just a story about a little girl who just wants to play the drum. And like,
Oh,
it's just absolutely beautiful. I wept like 3 times, and it's only like 20 minutes long. That's New York Times and is available free on YouTube. Incident is the New Yorker, also available free. I believe that's like 18 minutes. And I Am Ready, Warden. Heavy watch, as you might expect, but that's about 20 minutes on Paramount Plus. So most of those are easy. If people are wanting to do the Oscar death race and see it all, the 2 on my list that are concerning are The Porcelain War, which has been in theaters very limitedly, but isn't circulating widely. And then the documentary short Death by Numbers doesn't seem to be available anywhere. So they got to hammer out that deal to do the documentary shorts night to get
how
that
did
one
you watch
seen, I
No
think.
Other Land? Because as far as I know, that doesn't actually have a distributor yet.
That is coming to theaters. A bunch of my theaters popped up, and it'll be out by I think it's a Valentine's Day release, right? Like a nice, heartwarming.
Perfect.
Everybody wants to go out and see that. So here in Boston, the Coolidge Corner immediately said, "We got this coming. Don't worry, we got you covered." And I believe the date was the 14th.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because I had read that they were just trying to self distribute it, which sounds crazy, like in terms of how difficult that would be. So it's good to hear that it's actually going to
It
be in the
looks
theater.
like it was actually available for rent or buying on iTunes, and then it got pulled down,
Oh, no.
maybe because they got a deal or something.
Oh,
But
mm-hmm.
because they're, that thing where the pages exist for it, but it's not actually there anymore. So it had that going
Yes,
on.
I've checked the I'm Still
Mm.
Here page like 15 times, and it keeps saying
Yes.
coming soon. And I'm like, ugh. Same thing. Oh, Memoir of a Snail is there to buy or rent. That's on VOD. So if you don't want to subscribe for a trial of AMC Plus, that's the way to go. That's probably what I'll
I
do.
believe AMC Plus launched because they had Mad Men and they had Breaking Bad, and they retained the rights to it for a little bit on streaming, and then they didn't. I don't know if they acquired it, but they have a deal with a bunch of smaller, more boutique. Like they had Crunchyroll for a while, which does anime, and they do
Shudder.
Shudder, which is horror movies. And so when you subscribe to AMC Plus, you get all these other things. So my guess is Memoir of a Snail, which I keep wanting to call Memoir of an Invisible Snail, which is very, very much conflating movies. I believe that, but I would guess that might be on a different like subservice, but you would get it through AMC Plus. But I could be wrong, and it's just on AMC proper.
All right. Well, I think that was a pretty thorough breakdown. I'm satisfied. Almost as satisfied as I was to find out that I predicted a lot of these.
Jen, real quick, tell us your numbers.
So my gold derby score, which is skewed by me not really paying attention to the shorts. Sorry, Greg. I usually wait until after the nominations to do that. I was batting like a 75 point something accuracy, but that's because I missed like a bunch of the shorts. Just the other categories, I got 5 out of 5 in 5 categories. I got 4 out of 5 in 10 categories, and 3 out of 5 in 3 categories, and I had 8 out of the 10 Best Picture nominees. So I think that's the best I've ever done with nominations.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if that means that it was like more chalk than normal, but I don't think it was.
No.
I think I was just more tuned in.
There was a lot of, the chalk ended at like usually the second or third nomination, and then everything was a question mark afterwards. So that feels like good tea leaf reading.
Yeah. And what was funny is that in my spreadsheet, I made like a muted green. Like I put green for ones I got right. And then below the I put 5 nominees, and then I had a line, and then I put like alternates. And almost every category I had like a muted, almost wicked green pick. So like out of the 2 or 3 that I was like, oh, it might be this. It was one of the whatever one actually got in was one I had below the line. But yeah, not to be confused with below the line categories. So yeah, it
Below
really
the line
was one of
nominations.
those years where it was like the first 3 or so you could be pretty confident about, and then those last couple spots, yeah, were crazy. So
Now we got to close it out with one question. It's the 23rd of January. It is nomination day. Right now, predict who's winning Best Picture. We'll just do the one. Best Picture. Who is it?
I'm taking Amelia Perez because I just crapped on all
Yeah,
the
he
people who
said-
like it. So let me say that it wins, and they can be happy, and I'll be happy for them to be happy.
I'm gonna say a complete unknown.
Now
Because
we're talking.
it really did, which we haven't reviewed yet, so I haven't shared my thoughts on it really. But
But you did block it from the nominees in favor of Hundreds of Beavers. The people remember. The
because
people
I hadn't
remember,
seen it
Jen.
yet.
Another movie like Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, where you think I got it, and then suddenly it starts to shift and build and becomes a masterpiece. So I understand why you were thinking about it, Greg.
Here's why I think I would pick a complete unknown. One is that its strength with these nominations. Why I think people are I think we're going to be distracted by the high number of nominations of Amelia Perez, and no one's going to notice the strength of a complete unknown. And in a year where there's like so much split opinion, maybe people go back to what feels like a classic Oscar movie, which we'll get to in our review. Complete Unknown isn't like a standard music biopic, but it does still feel like comfortable, nice, warm blanket Oscar fare to me. So that's why I think, yeah, I can't believe I don't know if I would have expected to pick that, but that's that's what I'm going with. Is I think a Complete Unknown sneaks up from behind, and the momentum just keeps going.
Well, I will say I was trying to think of my answer, and I want to say Brutalist, but the thing that comes to mind against it at the moment is that it is so much the Oppenheimer lane, like a story about America, and it's kind of dark, and it has felt like the Academy likes to change it up year to year lately with really different picks. So it's bad content. I'm going to join Jen in Complete Unknown, and maybe it's hope dicting. The reason I'm not saying Wicked is I just think I just don't think the kind of, while the critics and their anti Amelia Perez Wicked sentiments don't really matter, there's so much of that in the atmosphere. I think it might actually pressure a lot of voters to be like, well, I don't want to be basic. I don't want to just go with those. So I'm not saying it's fair, but I'm going to say Complete Unknown, cosign Jen's reasons. I also think it's a really obvious number 2, number 3 on your ranked choice ballot, kind of whatever you like.
Conclave and a Complete Unknown do the best on a preferential ballot, because I can't think of too many people who just like actively don't like those movies.
Well, here's the thing I was curious about, and I don't want to, we shouldn't dig into it because we've already been talking for so long, but maybe for a future thought process and maybe another conversation, is trying to predict what are the first 2 movies to fall off on a preferential ballot. What are the 2 movies that are going to get the least number of votes? And who do those voters put number 2? Because I think that's the path to, I think it's so easy to be like, well, like Amelia Perez voters might put this second, but like Amelia Perez is going to be counted the whole time. Wicked's going to be counted the whole time. It's the movies that get underneath like the lowest amount. So we're like, is that Dune? Is that Nickel Boys? Cause it's the most sort of out there. Is it, is it The Substance because it's the most like kind of, wacky? I don't know. Like figuring out, is there any, it might be true that a Complete Unknown and Conclave are like 3 and 4 in the vast majority of the ballots, but they might, which one of those or which other movie is going to be 2 or 3 on the ones that are going to matter in terms of the process. I don't know how to figure that out though.
I think Dune seems like it would coast through the middle,
Yeah.
But maybe that's good for it. But I think a lot of people.
I mean, it would for us. I have been very pessimistic about Dune's chances of late, and I think the Academy forgot about it. It did fine today, but I would probably say Dune and the Substance are at the bottom. Is probably that's who I'd go poll to answer PT's question, is who would vote for those 2 number 1 Because they also sound like awesome people to talk to, right? Like you look at his list and you're like, the substance, that's my jam. Like, I want to talk to that person, see what's going on.
Yeah, so it's like
so is the idea like, okay, you put the substance as number one, you get knocked out. What is your number two choice? Is that what we're asking?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I mean, are they international French director Emilia Perez people and they put them up there? Is it they want women forward stories? They go with Honora. Do the Dune people want the blockbusters, so they go Dune then Wicked? Do they want the big sweeping epic? They go Dune Brutalist. Like, are they just like dudes that remember reading things in the 60s, so they like Bob Dylan, so they read Dune and they listened to Bob Dylan, so Complete Unknown.
You do realize both those movies starred Timothy Chalamet, which is a much easier connection than dudes who read a book in the 60s.
But I my guess is there are more Academy voters who were alive in the 60s and remember Frank Herbert and Bob Dylan than are voting based exclusively on loving Timothy Chalamet.
Right. Well,
good point. A great point.
I'd say to conclude, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
Oh,
oof.
Nope.
All right, I quit the podcast. Thank you. This has been Greg.
All right, wait. So, Greg, where can people find you?
I am on social media, particularly Instagram and Letterboxd at EyonCanon, EYEONCANON. In particular, my by hand paperwork is always something I'm proud of on nomination day, and does have a kind of quick cheat sheet for if you're looking where to find one of these nominees. I started the day needing to see 7 features and 15 shorts. That's already down to 4 features and 11 shorts. So we're going to clean it up fast this year. I should be done on the 27th of February because that's the first time I can see Porcelain War.
And then what? Like, don't get done.
What? No. And then Thanos style, he rests.
Yeah.
And not Thanos style, it's Captain America style. He'll be Red Hulking. He'll have switch gears and he'll be in that direction.
You gotta fit that in the middle. PT, where can people find you when you're not Red Hulking?
You can when I'm not being unfairly cruel to all the people who like Emilia Perez. After Greg and Jen said very nice things about not doing that, so my apologies to all of our Emilia Perez fans, including Antonio. But you can see me try to atone on my Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. You can also follow the show there at LTR Pod. You can follow the show on Instagram, Threads, or Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com, and you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a review, leave a comment, leave a rating. We would love to hear from you and have you stick around. Jen, how about you?
You can find me on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI. And you can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen. You can probably also find me still being sad that Marianne Jean-Baptiste is not an Oscar nominee for the second time. She already has one, but still.
Also, go see Hard Truths. That's starting to spread.
Yes,
too late. But go see it. It's really good.
Don't go see the last show, girl. Skip it. You're free. You're free, my friend. Run for the hills.